Hello, everybody. Banjo Story here again. And I'm back now with what's going to be part 2. So you can probably see the title of the video in the top left corner of the screen here. It's called The Biology of Subnautica Part 2. So I did do a React video maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago now, on the first part of this. This is a video made by a channel called Curious Archive. So if you want to go back and watch the original video, I'll have the link available in the description of this video. But the gist of this is it's looking at all the various animal species in Subnautica, kind of giving a little breakdown of them, sort of as though they are sort of real biological creatures, kind of thinking of them in the context of what how they would fit into like an Earth ecosystem. Obviously, the ecosystem they're existing in is not Earth. It is an alien ecosystem and like a simulation of an alien ecosystem also. And we talked a little bit about that in part 1. But what it seems like this video is probably going to be is going a little bit deeper. So if you're not familiar with Subnautica, it's a video game where you play a character who lands on an alien planet that is covered in ocean. And you need to kind of do the survival bit, find food, find water, build things type of deal. It's one of those games. And as you progress through the game, you kind of get to deeper and deeper and deeper parts of this ocean that covers this planet. And so in part 1, we were mostly hanging out in the shallows. And so I assume in part 2, what we'll be doing is going a little bit deeper, talking about some of the animals that you'll encounter a little bit later in the game. So I think with no further ado, we'll get started here. So this is The Biology of Subnautica Part 2 by Curious Archive.
Welcome back to Curious Archive. This video is the finale of my 2-part series on the biology of the video game Subnautica. In these alien seas, breathtaking landscapes, enormous predators, and unexpected mysteries are still waiting to be discovered. And just like how life in Earth's oceans gets stranger the deeper you dive, the depths of planet 4546b are far more extreme than what's on the surface. They're also highly dangerous, and I can confidently say that this ranks among the scariest experiences I've had while doing fieldwork for the archive. But I'm determined to uncover the secrets of this ocean. So ride with me in my deep sea submersible as we conclude this expedition into the unknown. To the north, beyond the edge of the grassy plateaus, huge mushroom trees grow in abundance. Despite their name and appearance, mushroom trees are actually a particularly long-lived species of coral.
Yeah, and that's like an interesting thing that like needs to sort of be hurdled anytime you're talking about like extraterrestrial life, is that we tend to use terminology that like is in reference to things that are on Earth. But if you were like actually thinking about this as a biologist, like these are not mushrooms. These aren't even corals. None of the like free swimming stuff we're going to experience are actually fish. None of the, we're not going to run into any arthropods, because like all those things are a product of evolution that has occurred on Earth from like a single common ancestor at some point. So even though we're going to be encountering things that are like superficially similar to things that we would encounter on Earth, and probably fill pretty similar niches to things that we would encounter on Earth, assuming that like evolution has happened in this game in a similar way to how it has happened in real life, none of these things have any relation whatsoever to anything that exists on Earth. This is a completely separate, completely distinct, completely unrelated batch of living things that, you know, even though we're saying, you know, they're mushrooms, they're corals, they're fish, they're crabs, whatever, aren't. Like, we're using that terminology because they're superficially similar, but they aren't actually related to any of those things.
In the shade of these ancient giants, a new classification of life is swimming. These are jelly rays, an ethereal ray species with highly translucent bodies. In Earth's oceans, translucent lifeforms are quite common in the lower light depths. The jelly rays are therefore a sign we're getting closer to the deeper, and more fantastical, regions of 4546b.
Yeah, and he mentioned that you see translucent stuff become more and more common as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into the ocean. And the reason for that is that, like, generally, if you're going to have pigments in your skin, it's making a couple of assumptions, or at least one of a couple of assumptions. Assumption one would be that stuff is like potentially going to be able to see it. So you'll see pigmentation that exists for the sake of like display coloring, if you're like trying to impress a mate or whatever, or for camouflage. But as you get deeper and deeper and deeper into the ocean, and light gets less and less and less and less, that type of thing matters less because stuff isn't going to see it anyway. So you start seeing animals that don't incorporate pigment because it's just like a thing that is another thing you got to make, and you don't get any benefit of it. The other benefit that like surface level thing gets from pigment is protection from solar radiation, protection from light damage, things like skin cancers and things like that. And so, again, as you get deeper and deeper and deeper in the ocean, you don't experience that as much. And so the benefits of having the pigment kind of go away. And so what he's talking about here, where you start seeing animals that don't have pigment in their skin and as a result are translucent, is very true.
Beyond the safety of the mushroom forest, the twilight of the bulb zone awaits. Here, luminescent bulb bushes dominate the landscape and have evolved to grow in this rocky, sandy environment thanks to a highly advanced system of roots. And along the seafloor, raging volcanic geysers launch boiling liquid and chunks of molten rock into the surrounding water. The extreme heat from these geysers charboils any fish that swims too close. An ominous light flickers in the murk. The source is an ant eel, a huge serpentine predator covered with glowing prongs that produce zaps of electricity. These aggressive creatures use electric discharges to intimidate other life forms and kill their prey with a single deadly shock. Such living batteries might seem biologically inexplicable, but the curious electric eel on Earth might help demonstrate how an organic creature could produce an electric field. Electric eels use disc-shaped cells packed into specialized organs to generate their electric currents, as incredible as that might sound. So it's possible that the ant eel's prongs contain similar cells, although the bioelectricity of an ant eel is far more extreme.
Fun fact about electric eels: not actually eels. We just call them eels because they're kind of long and skinny. They're actually part of a group called the knife fish. The other thing he touched briefly on there was bioluminescence, which I think we touched a little bit on in the first one. And again, it's a thing that you start seeing more and more frequent as you get deeper and deeper and deeper underwater. A lot of the times it's used as a means of attracting prey items. So you put a little light, stuff is inclined to come towards it, and then you eat it. Can be used to find other members of your same species as well when you're in like way deep light condition, or way deep ocean, like low light conditions. What's weird about what he's talking about here is I don't know a whole lot of examples of bioluminescence as it's appearing on plants. I don't know if there is like a real world Earth analog for what he was talking about with those the bulb things. Because he mentioned that they have root systems too, which implies a plant-like thing. I don't know if that's really a thing in the real world. It seems it rings as strange to me that would be a thing, because obviously like your shtick when you're a plant is you are using light as an energy source. And so being like a deep water plant that's relying on bioluminescence rings a little strange to me. I don't know how exactly that would work, but again, we're in an alien planet here. Who knows? Who knows what they're getting their energy from?
A series of screeches announces the approach of a legion of bone sharks. Highly aggressive and territorial carnivores, it's unlucky to encounter so many at once. Their thickly armored exoskeletons, which give them their names, are adapted not just to deter larger predators, but also other bone sharks. The distinctive segmentation of these exoskeletons suggests bone sharks might share a common ancestor with the sand sharks we glimpsed on our last outing. If so, it's a fearsome family tree.
The other interesting thing that the bone sharks and the sand sharks share are these really thick, heavy pectoral fins. The these fins, which is not something you see in a lot of earth fish. You don't typically see that like big, bulky, heavy like pectoral fin. There is a group of, at this point, mostly extinct fishes that have sort of that type of thing going on, called the lobe-finned fishes, that are actually the progenitors to pretty much everything that lives on land now, at least everything that lives on land and is a vertebrate now. But you don't really see these big, thick, like meaty, kind of paddly fins in fish anymore. And so it's cool that they like went out of their way to be like, yeah, well, they have these like segmented bodies, but also have these big, thick, paddly fins. Because again, like as far as I can recall, you like don't really see this in a lot of species, even on the Subnautica planet either. You see kind of relatively prototypical like fish type fins. So having them be sort of a distinct, separate thing, it lends some credence to being like, yeah, this is like a family of fishes that are, you know, experiencing similar evolutionary pressures as ones on Earth would
Bone
be.
sharks might share a common ancestor with the sand sharks we glimpsed on our last outing. If so, it's a fearsome family tree. While returning to the shallows to prepare for the next leg of my journey, I spot a new type of colorful fish. Something about the way it looks is truly hypnotic, and I want to swim closer, and then it bites my nose. That is a mesmer, a sneaky little creature that looks harmless while its four fins are folded up, but unfurled can create hypnotic patterns that have evolved to distract prey while it goes in for the kill.
I don't recall encountering this fish when I was playing the game. That I didn't actually like beat it, but it's interesting that we're talking about this while we're seemingly just like swimming around in the shallows, because I don't think I ever encountered this. The like weird pattern that they display that's meant to like be distracting or sort of hypnotic is obviously very reminiscent of like a cuttlefish type of thing, where they can change the color on their body and do patterns in a relatively quick way that is like distracting or that kind of arguably sort of hypnotic to certain prey items. On Earth, it's really specifically effective against like shellfish. It's like crabs get owned by this. I don't necessarily know why, but I know that's kind of the target for it. The other thing that sort of is your like cuttlefish tie-in here is the shape of the pupils. This like weird, like kind of curvy S-shaped pupil is something you also see in cuttlefish and not much else. So that's our analog for this one, is kind of cuttlefish things, even though this is kind of looks like it's supposed to be like I don't know, does this look like a vertebrate of some sort? I guess I don't know. It's kind of almost looks a little chitinous too. It almost looks a little arthropody. I don't know. Interesting critter, this one.
Thankfully, it seems I'm a bit too big to be swallowed up, but this is one fish to avoid. With supplies replenished, it's time to venture further into the unknown. Under the seafloor, networks of caves lead deeper into the uncharted interior of planet 4546b. Some of these caves are massive and contain entire ecosystems of their own, and the Jellyshroom Cave is one of the most miraculous. Here, among the stalagmites, grow jellyshrooms, massive, highly luminescent flora which might be distantly related to the tiny acid mushrooms of the shallows. In the purple light of the jellyshrooms shine the biters, small carnivores that stalk these caves for small prey. The antenna on their forehead seems to resemble the deep-sea anglerfish's lure at first glance, but the biter's antenna actually serves an entirely different purpose. It contains olfactory organs that help it detect bodily fluids in the water.
That's interesting. If that's the purpose of the antenna, I don't know why it glows. So like when you're saying olfactory, what you're referring to is like smell adjacent things. And so the idea of these things is they show up and attack things that are already injured, basically. They're sort of pseudo scavenger type of things. And so what they're saying is that they have this sensory organ on their head that is there for the purposes of like sensing blood in the water and going and getting at it. But again, it like has this weird bioluminescence to it that I don't know why you would put that on your like primary sensory organ. Doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me why you would do that. Also, just like shape wise on this fish, again, this is something that we've seen with one of the other ones, the boomerang fish, where it has the two eyes on the side of its head. And I assume with this one, it's got two eyes on either side. And I think we did see with the boomerang fish that it had two eyes on either side of its head, which is an interesting thing because it's something that like to a certain degree makes a lot of sense. Things on Earth, we typically have two eyes. And when you have two eyes, you're kind of making a choice. Do you put them up towards the front of your head like humans do? In which case you have a really relatively substantial area where the vision cones from both eyes are overlapping one another, and so it gives you good depth perception. Or do you set them way on the side of their head like a lot of prey item fish have, which gives you a much bigger peripheral vision, like you can see much further around your head, but the trade-off is that your depth perception is bad. With this, you kind of get in the best of both worlds, where this thing has its eyes set way on the side of its head, and so it probably has a pretty big peripheral vision, but it also has two eyes on either side of its head, so it similarly is getting the overlapping vision cones that facilitate that perception as well. So kind of a cool little interesting thing there. And like, we don't see this on Earth. I don't know of any animals that have this, but it's something that like I would see that and be like, yeah, that makes sense. I get what the benefit of that is. Weird lack of fins on this thing. Like, it's kind of seems like a fish that would not have the easiest time like steering itself around very well. Kind of has a almost, I guess, like a tadpole look more so than like a fish look. It's, I guess, interesting in and of its own right. Oh, the teeth are super weird too. Grippy teeth, not like chewy teeth. I grab and I bite and I hold, and I am not well equipped to do much else. Although it seems like they're maybe sort of parasitic or scavengery, so maybe they do just bite and like consume body fluid. That's a weird stuff.
Biter's antenna actually serves an entirely different purpose. It contains olfactory organs that help it detect bodily fluids in the water. In other words, the biter can smell its prey anywhere in the cavern. Unless, of course, the biter becomes prey itself. Winding through the cave is an unsettlingly lengthy crab snake, the apex predator of this environment. What makes this predator so deadly is not just its size, but its ability to hide in plain sight. The crab snake has a symbiotic relationship with the local jelly shrooms, using their hollow interior as the perfect lair from which to ambush prey. In behavior and appearance, the crab snake somewhat resembles Earth's bobbit worm, an unattractive predator that also ambushes its prey. In the jelly shroom caves, one needs to keep an eye out.
And I don't have a whole lot that's interesting to add there. Like, the thing I was going to say is, yeah, it seems like it's kind of a bobbit worm type of deal. The one thing he said there that I don't necessarily know if is fully correct is he called it a symbiotic relationship with the mushroom thing. A symbiotic relationship implies that both parties are benefiting directly from it, and it seems like the crab snake gets cover from which to attack prey from, or also, I guess, potentially hide from larger predators if they exist. Not abundantly clear if the mushroom is getting anything out of it, which would mean it's not a symbiotic relationship. And so, in the absence of the mushroom getting any real benefit from it, we wouldn't call that necessarily a symbiotic relationship per se. The term you would use for that would be commensalistic relationship, and so one is benefiting and one is neither benefiting nor being harmed. Kind kind of an interesting, like, larger topic is what we call sort of relative relationships. So like there's a, a further kind of along that end of the spectrum where you have one species that's benefiting and the other one is being harmed, and that's what we would call a parasitic relationship. Um, but typically, when you say a symbiotic relationship, typically referring to a relationship there where both species are benefiting. You'll hear this called mutual.
Elsewhere on the seafloor, another shadowy cavern beckons. After many hours navigating the cave system, I surface in a cave that strangely seems lit by daylight. I realize I've stumbled upon something extremely rare for planet 4546b, dry land. This tiny island is the peak of an undersea mountain connected to an aquatic cave system, and it's one of the few places on the planet you can encounter terrestrial life. Scuttling along the beach are cave crawlers. As their name implies, these crab-like creatures have evolved to crawl along the sides of cave walls, which is likely why they were able to adapt to this fleeting landmass relatively quickly. Analysis of their biology suggests they possess a gas exchange membrane to breathe air, instead of fully functional terrestrial lungs. Soaring,
Which is kind of similar to how modern, like, or not modern, real world arthropods exist, is kind of gas exchange type of. Yeah, I guess I don't have anything real crazy to say about this other than that, like, the eye is gigantic. You typically don't see things on Earth that just have like a single eye. You don't really see that. At least in terms of having like an eyeball the way that we think of eyeballs. You'll see things that have like photosensitive receptors like on the top, or it'll be like, yeah, I got one spot and I don't see with it, but I can tell if there's light being shined on me. And typically those are things that are, when it comes to like actually being able to see, what they're more worried about is finding cover than necessarily like finding anything in particular. So it's like, oh, there's light shining on me. That must mean I'm out in the open and I need to not be out in the open. Which doesn't seem like the way that cave crawlers operate. They seem like they have like real vision. And so it's weird to have like this one big eye in the middle of your back if sort of that's the way you're operating as far as the way stuff on Earth goes.
There, instead of fully functional terrestrial lungs. Soaring overhead is a life form that has spent much more time adapting to life above the waves. This is a sky ray, an avian creature that has, remarkably, evolved powered flight. Although its wings give it some resemblance to aquatic ray species, analysis shows no particular genetic link. Instead, the sky ray appears to have split off from the common evolutionary tree much earlier than most other species on the planet, perhaps at a time when dry land was more prevalent. In any case, it seems we've now seen all this island has to offer.
Yes, and the interesting twist on what he just said there is it seems like there is a presumption that similar to Earth, there is an assumed like common ancestor that all things on this planet are sharing. So if you're saying that this is less related, that it diversified away from sort of the main line earlier than what other things did, like I said, you're presuming a singular common ancestor, again, similar to what Earth has.
Or maybe not. On one end of the island is a tremendous artificial spire. This mysterious monolith appears to be the work of advanced extraterrestrials, who, much like myself, came to this planet from afar. But did they come to study the life here like I did, or were their intentions more sinister? In any case, it seems this planet's greatest secret is still waiting to be uncovered. To the south, the seafloor plunges lower than ever before. We have come upon the Grand Reef. Here, orb-like blue plants called anchor pods risk floating off due to their gas-filled membrane, only staying in place due to their net-like root system. And nearby stomp a herd of sea treader leviathans. These vast herbivores roam the depths in search of plants on which to graze. The thunderous nature of their rhythmic steps is truly something to experience. Perhaps the most curious thing about these creatures.
Maybe this is what he's about to say, but the front limb that they're standing on isn't a limb. It looks like it's like a proboscis, which maybe is how they eat. Maybe they're kind of skimming along the bottom and nibbling on stuff as they go. But using your mouth to walk is an interesting feature.
Creatures is the fact they have 3 legs, something almost never glimpsed in nature. Analysis suggests their front leg is actually an elongated snout.
So they don't have 3 legs. They have 2 legs and a big long proboscis
Used
thing.
to siphon plant material from the sea floor and to maintain balance. As alien as this might seem, there are some species of earth tripod fish with elongated fins that used to similarly stand on the sea floor. Right now, it appears the sea treader leviathans are migrating, so it's best not to disturb them.
And those are because, like, behaviorally, they're very similar to things like whales, which you kind of presumably have to be if you're going to be as big as those things are. Is you have to rely on a certain degree to, like, I just got to be taking in calories constantly. And you heard sort of whale-ish noises coming from them too, which presumes like some level of intelligence if they're, vocalizing to one another on a regular basis, like living in a group and vocalizing in that way. Which would be weird because they, like, appearance-wise are very sort of arthropody, which I don't think we've seen anything else on this planet so far that is like sort of notably arthropod like in origin, that sort of has this like implied level of intelligence to it, that like that level of communication, and like the fact that you see them like living in groups, and if I remember right, you see like young ones with them too, so there's like an implied like raising young thing with them. There's a behaviorally, like, you see a bunch of stuff with these things that like imply a level of intelligence that we don't typically attribute to arthropods on Earth, and I don't think necessarily apply, so far at least, to animals on this planet either. Unique critter, those.
Beneath the Grand Reef, caverns take us further into the abyss. Here, the intimidating crab squid waits to butcher prey with its 10 limbs. Swim close to one and they'll unleash a mysterious bioelectric discharge, which has the properties of an electromagnetic pulse. While they appear to have massive brains, analysis suggests the large organ within their translucent sac is actually their stomach, which the crab squid fill with their bioluminescent prey. As a result, they seem attracted to light sources, convincing me to make a hasty exit from my submarine.
So this is similar to what we saw with the things up in the kelp forest in part 1, where they are attracted to shiny things for the things up in the shallower water. These things are attracted to bioluminescent things because a lot of their prey items are bioluminescent, which in turn makes them kind of aggressive towards you and like your submarine and things in the game when you have your lights on.
This turns out to be a good call, as it drags my sub into the depths. If there are other creatures like the crab squid on the prowl down here, I'm going to need something a little larger. For the next perilous leg of the journey, I'll be piloting a Cyclops submarine, a vehicle that should be able to withstand the crushing depths of the abyss. Below the deep Grand Reef awaits a surreal environment of eerie green fog. This is the Lost River, a region covered in alkaline brine pools, which give the illusion of an underwater stream.
And this is a thing that sort of happens in real world oceans too, where you get these areas that are like exceptionally salty. Like it's an interesting thing that happens in water where like as you add more salt to it, it gets denser. So typically in the ocean, what you see is that the water gets saltier and saltier and saltier as you get to the bottom. And so at the bottom, you get all this salt kind of congregating like at the very bottom and ends up with these substantially saltier than the water around them sometimes. You see it in fresh water in particular. So like it's a big issue when it comes to like salt runoff. Like I live in Minnesota, and one of the things that we do here is we salt our roads in the winter to keep the ice off of them. But then all that salt runs off into the local lakes, and what you get are these, is the salt runoff that disproportionately congregates like in the bottoms of lakes because it's more dense than the water is. So you get these areas that are salty at the bottom, and that has an impact on the local ecosystem. The kind of flip side of it is there usually is an area kind of near the top of the water that is disproportionately salty too, when it comes to the ocean. And that's because evaporation happens at the surface. So what you get is, you can see my arrow here. So if you were to like sort of draw the line where, if you're at the top and, you're at, say, this level of salty, like you get, you have a stretch where you're like getting less and less and less salty because this is the area that's being like affected by evaporation. So the water is getting evaporated and leaving the salt behind. So you have more salt than normal, like right near the top. But then you sort of hit a threshold where it starts getting way saltier again because this is where the salt is congregating and the water's not evaporating because it's far enough below the surface. And then by the time you get down to the bottom, like the very, very bottom, you're at like your peak saltiness when it comes to the. There's kind of this like C-shaped graph as far as like the amount of salt that you have in your water column in a deep body of water. And so these like brine pools that are happening like at the very bottom of the ocean here, check out, like that makes sense.
Brine pools also exist in Earth's oceans and are extremely toxic due to their high salinity. Best not to get too close. Above these pools drift the haunting ghost rays. Relatives of the jelly rays from the mushroom forest, in these extreme depths, the ghost rays have become almost completely transparent, to the point where you can see the red of their internal organs. Elsewhere in the Lost River, blood crawlers, the spindly relatives of the cave crawlers, stride above the brine on stilt-like legs, rather unsettling forms of life.
What's interesting about these things relative to the cave crawlers is they seemingly have more eyes or more photosensitive areas or something, which is weird for an animal that is living like this deep down in the water to have like a bunch more like visual sensory organs, because presumably there's a lot less like you're relying a lot less on your vision down here because there's so much less light. And so having an animal that is closely related to a thing that lives on the surface, but I said appears to be relying more on its vision is weird.
In the central chamber, something truly horrifying is waiting. This ancient fossil belongs to a colossus far larger than any that currently swims through the seas. Indeed, it's so massive that its ribcage has become part of the Lost River's landscape. We should count ourselves lucky this unknown genus seems to have gone extinct long ago. Yet still alive are the river prowlers.
And we talked a little bit about just sort of the general scale of the animals that exist on this planet. We talked about the Reaper Leviathan and how it's like substantially longer than any animal that has ever existed on Earth. And they do a weird thing in this game where they have these really, really big animals and then also have them be like big, like hunting, chasing predators in a way that we've like never really seen on Earth. Just because like the success rate for that type of hunting tends to not work when you're that big. Like the calories expended to like catch your prey versus the calories you get back doesn't clear when you have like that much mass to sustain. And so again, an even bigger and like substantially bigger predator than even what like the Reaper Leviathans were. Like you gotta have big prey if you're gonna be that big. Like you can't be that big and be eating, you know, things that are as big as this thing is, like swimming in around amongst its rib cage. Because you're just never gonna eat enough of it. You can't do it. You know, not enough calories. Assuming, like I said, relatively like similar to Earth, like energy input output.
These aggressive, transparent predators haunt the gravesite of the Leviathan like vengeful ghosts. Even more frightening, their 4-head tendrils can lash out when attacking, allowing them to pull in prey. Not the sort of creature you'd like to encounter in the dark. But there is a strange beauty to certain regions of the Lost River. In a cove under the central chamber, the brine becomes a harmless blue, and ghost rays flock around a massive central tree. This tree appears to be an ancient nesting ground, as it is grown around a giant bioluminescent egg. While the egg itself is beautiful, whatever hatches out of an egg that size might not be. To find the adult form of the huge creature that hatches from this egg, we must venture into the nightmarish darkness of the Dead Zone. Here, at the edge of the habitable region for most fauna, we've found our giants, or they've found us. These aggressive monsters are ghost leviathans, and they're a major threat to this expedition. Analysis of their jaws suggests they feed on microscopic life forms that help them reach their massive sizes.
Thank you. Finally, somebody is like a filter feeder type. Although weird mouth shape for that. Like, don't have like a tall, skinny, narrow mouth if you're running around kind of filter feeder. Have a big, wide mouth. Cover more area.
Although they seem fully capable of feeding on something larger. Time to head back the way we came. The mystery.
But the other thing with the Ghost Leviathans is you encounter them if you kind of go off the edge of the map where the game wants you to be. And it seems like that the areas that we're exploring in the map represent a very kind of sheltered ecosystem relative to like the global ocean. Because like if you go off the edge of the map, it suddenly gets way deeper. It gets way darker, way deeper. You can see, well, you can't see because it's so much darker, but there's just like not stuff out there, which implies, you know, a bigger, deeper ocean, which potentially could exist in service to some of these larger animals that we're seeing, like the big fossil thing we saw a few minutes ago. But like a fossil that size, like can't exist in this area because have food in it, like can't areas that. So I said there is a bigger ocean out there, and we know that's true. So there might be bigger predators out there. Those big predators.
The mystery of the giant egg has been solved, but that's not the only strange thing in the Lost River. These ruins of a massive alien structure resemble the one on the island. The structure is guarded by these life forms, the Warpers, who possess a mind-bending ability. At will, they can somehow fold space-time and vanish into portals. This is not the ability of a natural life form. It seems we are dealing with an artificial creation. Searching for...
I don't know why you would assume that. I think this is true within like the canon of the game, but like why you would be like, oh, this can't naturally happen when you're seeing other shit on this planet.
For answers, I enter the ruined building. Here we can see the unfinished artificial body of a warper. They did not evolve and are a creation of the extraterrestrials. But for what purpose? Translating a digital message, it seems these alien architects came to 4546b many years ago, searching for a cure for a disease. And the warpers are their artificial quarantine enforcers. Given the lack of any living architects on 4546b, it appears that they were unsuccessful. On a table in a nearby lab, they've left behind an egg of a curious creature. After returning to the surface to recharge my submarine, I hatch the egg and this delightful life form emerges. This is a cuttlefish, a friendly, rotund little creature that displays high levels of intelligence and curiosity. I've also found it's quite a fan of treats. Analysis suggests it's possible this creature has been imported from another world, or even genetically altered to be extra friendly. It's possible the architect aliens kept them as pets, just like we do with dogs. It's tempting.
Yeah, you can selectively breed animals to have specific behaviors. Like I said, like dogs are an example of this, where dogs, like even in a quote unquote natural setting, don't act the exact same way that like wolves do, because over several thousand years at this point, they've been selectively bred for certain behaviors that in them to this day.
To stay longer with the cuttlefish in the shallows, yet I can't help but feel that in the abyss there are more mysteries I've yet to solve. Beneath the lost river, the landscape blazes with the fiery glow of molten rock. We've reached the lava zone, the deepest environment of them all. Here, incredible heat-resistant forms of life have evolved, like the crimson ray, a ray species that have developed a molten coloring to help it blend in with the lava, and the magmarang, a relative of the boomerang with a beautiful glowing tail fin. Another remarkable form of life is the lava larva, a grub-like creature that feeds off geothermal and electrical energy. I first learned this fact when I found one stuck to the windshield of my Cyclops, draining its energy.
These things are neat in that they, like I said, are kind of more feeding off of sort of alternative energy sources rather than just like eating other things. The ability to like latch onto a submarine and like suck juice out of it is wild as far as like what an animal would be like adapted to do. But this would, again, like we talked a little bit about sort of various like inter-animal relationships. So this would be a great example of a parasitic thing. This is obviously very reminiscent of a lamprey or a leech, where it, latches onto something bigger. And with lampreys and leeches, they're sucking like body fluids out and getting their calories from that. But for these guys, they're, living in an area that has like geothermal vents and seemingly has a bunch of animals that are, adapted to exist in this very like geothermically active space. And so it's as such adapted to consuming that type of energy rather than just like sucking body fluids out, which is cool. I think it's an interesting little niche. And you do see like stuff that you do see little ecosystems that develop around like geothermal stuff in Earth oceans, like very likely some of the earliest life forms on Earth were developing around these sort of geothermically active like deep ocean vent things. So it's cool to see that incorporated into the game.
This behavior is somewhat annoying. The energy conversion capabilities of this creature are truly remarkable. On the molten floor is something highly alarming. These skeletons belong to Reaper Leviathans, like the one we encountered in our last voyage. It seems that somewhere in the lava zone is a predator so large it can drag Reaper Leviathans into the depths. This doesn't bode well.
I would see that, and I would not see an animal that has been preyed upon. Like when an animal gets eaten by a larger predator, you're not going to find like a fully articulated skeleton just like laying there. Like that rings to me as a Reaper Leviathan that like died, it sank to the bottom and like got picked at by scavengers. More so than like, yeah, something like drag it down and ate it and just like, I don't know, pooped it out as like a fully articulated skeleton. Like that doesn't happen.
Basking in the red glow of the molten rock are lava lizards. These predators are too small to be our culprits, but they're nonetheless quite deadly. For defense, they are able to cover their bodies with hardened, lava-like natural armor. While such a behavior is far more extreme than anything on Earth, scaly-foot snails, which I've discussed on this channel before, can survive in volcanic vents by incorporating iron scales into their body like medieval armor. However, lava lizard biology takes this to a new level. At the end of the lava zone lurks a massive chamber. The loudest roar we've encountered on our voyage shakes the cavern. We found our Reaper Leviathan Slayer. This is a sea dragon leviathan, the largest predator in Subnautica. Possessing both arms and tentacles, these creatures exceed 350 feet, or 112 meters in length.
This is a thing that's like 4 times as long as a blue whale, which, like I said, blue whales are the longest animal that's ever existed on Earth. So that's the scale of thing we're talking about, is something that is 4 times the length and seemingly a lot more just like broadly massive than what like a blue whale is.
Sea dragons get their name from their ability to consume molten materials and expel them at their adversaries like they're breathing fire.
If you're existing in a space that is like very geothermically active, like there's just like lava pools around all over the place, like theoretically isn't like anything else that also is existing down here like similarly very resistant to like heat? Like what's the benefit of like having your draconic like breath weapon be fire? Because like everything down here is going to be resistant to it anyway, right? Because everything else also lives down here and has to deal with that heat all the time. Again, maybe an area where like the gaminess of the world is like getting in the way of something that would like actually make sense here. Because like also like who are you using that on? Like you're that big, like you don't have, at least that we've seen so far, like you don't have like competitors that you're having to like chase off of space other than maybe other dragon leviathans. In which case, like I said, it's not going to be very effective against them because they also are like resistant to heat and fire and things like that. Like it's a feature they have to like dunk on your submarine and nothing else. The video game.
I can only hope this absurdly deadly life form doesn't notice me. No such luck. A huge blow from the Leviathan rocks the Cyclops submarine. As a result, there appears to be a minor leak. Out of options, I have to abandon ship. Luckily, I have one last hope in the prawn suit, a deep-sea mechanical walker that should make an ideal escape pod. Ejecting from the Cyclops, it's a bit of a drop to the bottom. But it appears my plan has worked, as the sea dragon Leviathan thinks its foe has been vanquished. Here, at the end of our journey, lies its foe but it appears my plan.
Let's take a look here, how it's literally like swimming through like a column of lava. Who are you breathing fire at that's actually going to do anything to?
The sea dragon Leviathan thinks its foe has been vanquished. Here, at the end of our journey, lies a final mysterious building. With some difficulty, I pilot the prawn suit over to it. Inside, locked in a containment facility, the largest creature of Subnautica is waiting. This is a Sea Emperor Leviathan, and although it appears to be a relative of the sea dragon, it is in no way hostile. Like real-world baleen whales, the largest creatures on Earth, its diet consists solely of microorganisms. While the Sea Emperor Leviathan is so large I am unable to get a proper scan of it, it seems that it can somehow manipulate neurons to communicate telepathically, as it told me of its plight. The Sea Emperor was entombed here by the alien architects in the hope it could provide a cure for their disease, which I believe is in strict violation of the Intergalactic Code of Biological Ethics. At the request of this intelligent creature, I agree to take its hatchlings back to the surface with me. Watching the first moments of baby Sea Emperor's lives is a truly wondrous experience, even after all the biological marvels I've glimpsed thus far. Sadly, the Sea Emperor is at the end of its lifespan and informs me that it won't be coming with us. At the very least, I'm happy I can help their babies live on in freedom. It is a bittersweet conclusion to a long and winding journey. With the sea emperor babies returning to their natural habitat, our study of this region of Subnautica is at its end. There are other worlds waiting for us, and the time has now come to return to the stars. Thanks for watching.
I think he didn't talk about the Sea Emperor there. And I guess it's kind of like spoiler avoidance, I guess, on the video's part, but they're obviously like very reminiscent of the warpers as well, with the like similarly like 4 eyes, the like mandible-y mouth, the tentacles, the like whatever you call these 4 limbs, and then the like kind of psychic-y aspects of them as well. All are very reminiscent of that. So I wonder if there's some engineering that's happening there from the Sea Emperor to warper end of things. I don't know. But again, kind of speaks to the like when he was talking about the warpers was like, these are abilities that aren't of like normal things. And it's like, then you come and you meet the Sea Emperor and it's like speaking to you telepathically and looks similar. And it's like, oh yeah, this is fine. This is normal. Fully makes sense. No problem. But that is the Biology of Subnautica Part 2 by Curious Archive. And I see they've since I recorded the Part 1 video now come out with some Subnautica Below Zero stuff. So maybe I'll follow up and do those videos as well, the Biology of Subnautica Below Zero. Maybe that'll be interesting to do. But anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you when we see you.